Okay, so we're going to take your analysis and your figured bass and understanding of scales and things like that and stick it all together today and for the weekend. And this is a well-known piece of music. I'm going to play you just a little bit of it, and hopefully it will be very familiar. We're getting to the end of the first page there, and yeah, so what I'm going to try and do here in this video is to get you set up on the kind of things you should be doing for answering, and then we're going to look through and see if we can use our eyes and what we've just heard from our ears to help us understand what key we're in at the time, so that you can analyze this for chord numbers, Roman numerals, and figured bass. Okay, so Prelude is in C major, so we're just gonna throw a big C right there for C major. And one thing that you may have noticed already, but the first half of the measure and the second half of the measure are the same for the majority of the piece. And so we don't have to analyze here and here, but this is all just one big chord, and that's all one big chord and one big chord, okay? The other thing I can tell you ahead of time is that in most cases, there's a few places towards the end of the piece, there are no non-chord tones, which makes this ideal for analyzing chords, okay? So you have to think in the key of C major, and you have to read the notes. So C, E, right? G, C, E, this looks like a 1 chord, C chord, C major, so we use a Roman numeral 1. And it's in root position. See, now when you have these spun out over time, you have to think of the first note in the group as your bass or lowest note. So this is not a 1 and then a 1/6 for first inversion. This is all just like if you had one big stack of chords right there that got toppled over. But the first note in the group is the note that you decide whether or not this is an inversion, whether it needs a figured bass. Okay? So we're good right there, I think. Okay? 1 for all of that. Now let's take a look at this one right here. There's a C, a D, an A, a D, an F. I want you to think about that for a minute. A C, a D, an A, a D, and an F. So this is a D, F, A chord, sorry, D, D, F, A, with a C, which makes it a minor triad and a minor 7th, which makes it a D minor 7 chord. And that is my 2 chord here, and it's minor. But now because it's got a 7th on it, you might be tempted to write a 7 right there. But we're going to employ our figured bass numbers, which you were learning today and this weekend. And we know that if a chord has a 7th on it, and the 7th is the lowest note, right, then you put a 4/2 right there. Okay, this is a mistake. Somebody didn't connect that there. Who printed that off? All right, and now we're going to go over here. We have a B, a D, a G, a D, and an F. If you think about that long enough, that is a G, B, D, F chord. G, B, D, F is my 5 chord G, right? And it's a dominant 7th chord, so it's a major triad, so we put a major symbol there. And because it has a 7th on it, we might be tempted to put a 7, but remember in figured bass that would mean that the lowest note is the root, right? Instead, the 3rd is the lowest note, it's first inversion, and the symbol for that, we're just going to use the shorthand or abbreviated version, is 6/5, right? Remember, if this was a triad, you just put a 6, right? And because it's got, that would be the root right there. A 6th above the B would be the root. But because it's got a 7th on it, right? A fifth above or a step below that root would be the seventh, and that's why that's there. And we're going to go through and we're going to keep analyzing, okay? I'm going to do a couple more of these with you just to help you get in the swing of things and get you started. Here I have a C, E, G, C, E. It's another C chord. It's not a surprise actually, because we just had a 5 chord, and 5 chords like to go to 1 chords. So there's another 1 chord, and the root of the chord is the lowest one there. In truth, by the way, there are more tricks to knowing if you see a chord what's coming up. Like, because this was a 2 chord, I knew with about 95% accuracy that that's going to be a 5 chord coming up. So you stick through this into the next term, we learn about what we call chord progression. In other words, what chords like to go to what chords, what formulas work. Okay. Here we have an C, an E. It's good for a C chord, but watch out, there's an A and an A right there. A, C, E. There's no G, so there's no 7th. So this is A is A minor is a 6th chord, and it's lowercase because it is a minor chord. Now, the third of the chord is the lowest note or in the bass. So we don't just leave it like this, we put a 6 to tell us that this is a triad, and the lowest note is the third right there. Okay. Now, we're going to run into a little bit of a funny territory here. See, we have this here, a C and a D and an F sharp and an A and a D. Might be going like, what's going on here? Well, you can analyze this as a D, F sharp, A, and C, which would be a D dominant 7, right? The problem with this is that D dominant 7 is a 5 chord, not a 2 chord. Like in the key of C, D minor 7 is the 2 chord right there. We've already analyzed this. But with the modification of a sharp right there, it's no longer a 2 chord, it's functioning like a 5 chord. Now, here's where I'm going to help you with the rest of the pieces. We're going to go through and figure out what keys to analyze everything in. Music, especially like art music, classical music for lack of a better word, all this is Baroque period, you know, it has complicated forms, and knowing how the harmony starts out, the key, and where it progresses through and travels through different keys and things is an important part of the structure. And so we will become more increasingly aware of music changing keys as we go along. And this is no different. It's going to start in C, it's going to adventure out, it's going to go through some really, really interesting keys, and then eventually come back to the key of C. It's like a journey. So I'm going to ask you, if I have a C scale, no sharps and flats, and I add an F sharp to it, what scale do I have? And the answer is G major or E minor, right? So, which is it? Well, D, F sharp, A, C is the 5 chord for G major. Now, in second year, you'll learn to look backwards and say this is a 6 chord in the old key, and it's actually a sleeper agent. It's a 2 chord in the key of G, and it's like a double agent. It works in both ways, and that's good to know, but we're not going to keep doing that throughout this piece. Instead, I'm just going to say from here, let's analyze it in the key of G, okay? And that would be a 5 chord, and it's got its 7th in the bass, and so when you have the 7th in the bass, you 7th chord with the 7th in the bass, you put it 4-2 right there, okay? And we can keep analyzing this. And I want to show you that this is probably good to analyze in the key of G for a little while here, because we have chords that seem to be going along, and we still have our F sharp right there and stuff. But then when we get to here, we're in a different key. Well, maybe, but it's got a B flat and a C sharp, okay? So let's have you analyze in the key of G up to here, okay, from there, okay, in the key of G. All right. Well, what do we do with this? This is, let's figure out what the chord is right here. We have G, B flat, E, G, and C sharp. All right, well, let's figure out what that is. It's a E, G, B chord, but then it would need a D, and it doesn't have that. Is it a G, B, D chord? No, it doesn't have a D. Is it a B flat chord? B, D, F? No. I think the answer is C. Now I'm going to make a mess of my page up here, and you should be doing that too. C sharp, E, G, B flat. Right there. This is a C sharp diminished 7 chord right there. What does that mean? Well, diminished 7th chords are, think about what scale degree you'll find a diminished 7 chord on. That will be 7 in a minor key, right? It's the only place you can find it. And if C sharp is leading tone 7, what's my 1? The answer is it's going to be this chord right here, because 7 likes to go to its 1 right there. So let's check out this chord right here. D, F, A, D, F, A. This is D minor. Okay. Temporarily, we're in the key of D minor right here. Now, I'm just going to say that normally we would try and broad brush this and maybe not think of it quite so hard like this, but like in a more sophisticated way, you might see other people not change key constantly, but for our purposes, we want to do that. Locally speaking, right now, we're in the key of D. So this would be a 7, diminished 7, but what's the lowest note? The G. The 5th is in the bass. The 5th is in the bass, and if you remember, the shorthand for the 5th being in the bass is 4-3. If it's a 7th chord. If it's a triad, it would be 6-4, but this tells us it's a 7th chord, right? And then this is my 1 chord in the key of D minor, right? So, and the 3rd is in the bass. It's a 1 chord, it's a triad, so I put a 6 right there, okay? Let's look again here now. And I'm sort of helping you through parts of this and then leaving parts for you to do, okay? I'm in the, well, what's this chord right here? It's D, F, A flat, D, F, A flat, D, F, A flat. That's weird. That's a D diminished chord right there. I guess that could be a 7 chord in E flat major. I guess it could be a 7 diminished, oh wait, there's a B there, so we're wrong. B, D, F, it's a B diminished 7 chord. Ah, it's another diminished 7 chord. So this can only be what? 7 in the key of C minor, right? So we're going to go C minor here. And because diminished 7 chords only occur on scale degree 7, leading tone in minor. And the 5th is in the bass, so this is a 7. And the 4-3 is our figured bass. And we would be expecting to go to C minor here, but look, it's C major. So we'll put our 1 right here. And that tells us it's not a major chord, a minor chord, but a 1 in major. Now the real question is, and this has got a 6 right there, are we in C minor and borrowing this? Or sorry, are we in C major and borrowing this from the minor, or are we in C minor and borrowing this from the major? And the truth is that it's more common to borrow this. It's a technique they did. Bach is actually doing something clever. He's saying, I'm going to go 7-1, 7-1, right? So whether we call this C major or C minor, like I think in truth it's C major because that's where we end up, and they're just borrowing this from C minor. But you can see that, and I told you before, when we talked about diminished 7th chords, that they love this chord. They love to borrow it. Okay? All right. And can we do the rest in C major for a while here? Maybe. Let's take a look through here. I'm looking for a very specific chord. It's that one right there. See this one right here? G, B, D, F. This is my dominant chord in the key of C. This is, I haven't seen any other sharps and flats along here, so I suspect we're in C major, and if I listen, your ears will confirm that. But this is the dominant chord there, which really confirms that we're here. So I think we can be in C major now, all the way through the rest of the page, right? And I think you'll have a fine time doing those chords, all right? Let's go over the page here for a second. Okay. Oh dear. we have a flat introduced here. Let's not panic. C major plus a flat is key of F major or D minor. And if I'm in F major, my 5 chord is C or C dominant 7. C, E, G, B flat. This is a C dominant 7. So I think we've switched to F right here. And this is my 5. And look, this is in root position, so I can just put that there. Remember, there's an invisible 5-3 that we just don't write because it's implied. And here's my F, F, A, C. We have an extra note here, so don't just presume. I have an F with a 7, so this is going to be a 1. And we're going to put a large M there just to remind ourselves that it's a major 7th chord. And we're in root position, so it's just 7, not some inversion, right? Okay. And then, oh dear, we have more diminished 7th silliness going on here. We have a F sharp, an A, a C, and an E flat. That's F sharp, diminished 7, right? And that should take us to the key of G, shouldn't it? G minor, G major, if it's borrowing. And I think what we're going to find is he's borrowing all the time. He's in major, but he's borrowing, right? So I think we've got to think of ourselves. Now, technically, this would be G minor, but Bach is just borrowing that sound. We're going to leave it as G major. This is my 7. We'll call it fully diminished because it is. And the F sharp is in the bass right there, right? Now, you'd think we'd go straight to G, right? Think you'd go straight to G, but you're going to find a slightly different chord right here. And I told you that occasionally there'll be a non-chord tone, so I'm going to help you right here. There's A flat, F, B, C, and D. I think we can leave this note out. Don't think it's part of the chord, right? He's collapsing to the point where he can't just, he's trying to get it narrower and narrower on the top in the hand, and he can't find another chord tone, so he's just walking through these non-chord tone steps. But this is a B, D, F, A flat. This is a B diminished chord. So that would be the 7 in C, right? And I think it's going to be C major instead of C minor, even though it comes from the minor. So what's he doing right here? Well, he's actually like, how can he do the 7 here and then not go to a G? Well, the G is right down here. And if you think about G chord, G, B, D, F, right? Which is this chord right here. If you went up one more note, G, B, D, F, A, well, that's just B, D, F, A, in this case, A flat. So this is a coloristic substitute for that right there, okay? So anyhow, this is my 7, diminished 7, and the 7th is in the bass, so 4-2, right? And then here we have G, B, D, F. This is my dominant 7 chord. So I think this is really transient. It's pointing to this chord here, but it's really temporary. And this is a substitute for this chord because Bach's being clever, plus he needs to fill out another measure to make the phrase work. But when we get here, we're still in the key of C right here. I'm just going to put this here to remind us we're in the key of C major. And this is my 5-7, right? And the bass is 7 right there. And then here's fine. You can analyze. So what do you need to know about these two chords here? Let's just do this line together. You'll still have enough on your own. Here's my G, E, G, C, E. Looks like a C, E, G chord, right? But the G's in the bass. So this is going to be a 1 chord. But because the 5th is in the bass, you figure bass is 6-4, right? Now I'm going to help you with these 2 chords right here, okay? Because he's got some weird things going on where he has suspended notes, okay? This is G, B, D, and then there's a C right here. See that right there? That C is being held over from here, and it's kind of like a non-chord tone, right? So let's cancel that out for right now. No need to worry about that. Okay, so that would make this a G, B, D, F. There's no D, or sorry, B present because it's being held out right there. The real answer is that this is a G7 sus4 chord, if you want to think jazz-wise, because the 3 has been suspended up to a 4. We're going to ignore that, and you're just going to call this a 5 chord, and the root right there. If I were going to do this in full figured bass, I'd be like this. I'd be like 5-4, so that I'd know that I wasn't playing a 3 instead of a 4 instead of a 3, sorry. Okay, but then we get it back here. So this C then resolves down to right there. Bach is playing these games with our ears, and it's really sounds wonderful. This is my, 5-7 chord. Okay. All right. So what are we going to do at the end of this? How much can you analyze on your own, and how much do you need help with? Well, this is the same chord, kind of, as this right there, and I'll just help you through this. This G pedal right here that's going on, it's just like, if it was organ, they call it a pedal tone because it's in the foot. This is telling us that the piece is ending because this is our dominant note right here. We could kind of ignore it if we wanted to for analysis, but I don't think we will. I think we'll just keep it as is, except you need to know that it's not part of this chord right there. Okay, this is a very common thing. They would play a low dominant pitch, signaling that we're going 5-1, and then see, here's our 1 right here. So, but you can't always analyze it in the chord. Here, this is an F sharp, A, C, and E flat. That's an F sharp diminished 7, which puts us in the key of G, right? Which would make it a 7 diminished chord. If we want to think of that right there, we could give it an inversion, but with pedal tones, we usually don't do that. Let's do it anyways, just for practice. This is the 7th of the chord, so there's a 4-2 right there. And then this is a chord you can analyze. I think, though, video cut out there, I'll go back. I think we're just going to keep back and analyze this in the key of C right there. Okay? When we get into bigger things, we'll talk about that later. But I'm trying to keep this fairly simple. You can analyze that. You can analyze this. You can analyze this. Here, so this is the C dominant 7 chord, which is going to take us to the F. So you want to analyze this in F right here, right? This will be 5-7 going to an F chord with the C underneath, so that would be 1, but it will be a 6-4, right? And then go back to the key of C right there, and you can analyze this, but don't worry about that right there. All right, it gets a little murky at the end because Bach is doing what all composers did, which is they temporarily, like very, very micro level, change key to emphasize the next chord coming up. And we have terminology for that, but honestly, that's second year. The fact that you can kind of look at that and say, oh, okay, I kind of get that is good. So, but for this stretch from here to, let's see, here to here, and you can do from here to the end, oops, you can definitely analyze these sections right here on your own, right? And then you have these sections right here from here to there, right, in the key of G on the first page. And then from here on this last line, you can do as well. Remember, you're practicing reading the notes, figuring out what the chord is, figuring out what the number is for the key that you're in, and then applying the figured bass. Is it a triad? Is it a 7th chord? Right? And then if so, is the root in the bass the 3rd? It's the 5th? Or in the case of a 7th chord, does it have the 7th in the bass? What figured bass goes with that? Okay? Try and have that ready for Monday, because we're going to talk about it in class.